Hey, there we are.
It's always good when the first one of us says is, yay!
We are live at a different time today. We're morning Sam and Michelle for our Truro Famous Live this morning. And we are super excited to have Truro Famous Arash Madani here joining us this morning from Toronto. So I won't do much more of an intro because we want Arash to do all the talking this morning. So we're going to, without further ado, bring him on. Hey, Arash.
Nobody said all the talking, ladies. So nobody in the contract that you came over.
Yeah, strict contract that we signed and agreed upon.
I believe we signed it in crayon. I think that's
that's right. Yes. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, you got it. Great to be on with you.
Yeah, it's awesome. We were talking just before we went live. Michelle and I recognized Arash's backdrop from when he was on the kitchen party with Michael Landsberg.
Yeah. And that was, now you think of it, COVID time is so much different than regular time. It feels like it was maybe a couple of weeks ago, but it was not. It was a couple months ago. So
how was that experience for you, Arash? Because I know you were kind of part of the driving force of that event.
It was awesome. It was absolutely terrific, actually. And I mean, I'm very fortunate in my professional career that I get to go cover some different sporting events. But when you talk about something that really felt fulfilling, that was right up there with the rest. And it was so cool that, you know, Michael joined it thanks to his relationship with Jamie Carroll, who is somebody that, you know, there was a group of four of us who started talking about this idea that we all went to high school together at CEC. And we graduated 1997. God, I feel old.
I'm older than you are, so you're okay.
There you go. There you go. But it was great to connect with Jamie and Quinn and Drew. And suddenly, you know, in a few weeks, be able to put something together that we hoped just gave a lift, gave a smile. We called it a virtual hug to people who may have wanted it, who may have needed it, who may have just wanted an opportunity to smile and have some joy again after everything that went down in Portapic and economy and everywhere else. So it was so neat to see how everybody came together. And I think one of the coolest parts was we reached out to some people of notoriety to jump on. And anytime I texted anybody or emailed anybody, they'd be like, hey, you know, I reached out to Alex Anthopoulos, who's now the president of the baseball team in Atlanta, who used to be with the Blue Jays. To Haley Wickenheiser, a four-time gold medalist, who's now a doctor, and she's providing PPE to so many people out here with her COVID-19 drive. Everybody just replied with, how can I help? How can I be a part of this? And when you're part of something like that, you realize just how special it is and how unique it is. And so we got a lot of positive feedback and a lot of good, and I thought the viewership numbers were wild. So it was a pretty cool Saturday night, but it was a really neat process from start to finish to get to the finish line.
Yeah, I remember talking to Quinn about it. When I say pretty early on, you guys whipped that up pretty quickly, you know, in relatively speaking. And he was telling me about it and I was like, wow, that's so cool. And what a great idea. And I hope it works out. And then all of a sudden, you know, 10 days later, you guys were live and doing your thing. And it was, I said to you earlier, I do watch live streams. I do, but I rarely watch from start to end something. Mm-hmm. And I on to just kind of see how it was going and how it was going to work. And all of a sudden it was 2 hours later because you just kept it going, you know, Jonathan Torrance and the musical guests and everybody just kept.
Don't forget about Ian Stewart now, Michelle. Ian Stewart opening up $1 million with a chainsaw. I'm like, is this dude a world record? Is that what we're about to see here?
It's like in Truro now we're used to Ian being doing incredible things. But
is this the world now that you get used to watching somebody open beer bottles with a chainsaw? That's just another day at the office. That's how we go about it. Okay,
it's just the way it is. But yeah, but it was such a great program. you know, and I know that that's a huge undertaking to make something that's 2 hours long that is interesting for an entire 2 hours. And I thought it was great. And as a, you know, a resident of the area, it felt very, like you say, like a hug, like a little love letter of everybody saying, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
We love you. So it was lovely.
Yeah, it was great to team up, like I said, with those cats from high school. I don't think the four of us had been in a room in 20 years, and then suddenly we're having, you know, a couple times a week, we're having Zoom calls and we're sending a million emails back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just wild, the whole deal, because after the shooting, the 3-year-old goes missing, and then after the 3-year-old goes missing, I remember on a Sunday, just staying right over there, we were about to have a Zoom call when Jamie says, "Oh my God, the snowbird crash was Captain Jen Casey, also from Nova Scotia," and you're just like, how much more can this, you know, can we take?
Yeah.
So the other thing that was really impressive and I dealt with a lot of the media stuff and the sports stuff just because that's my genre. I reached out to people I knew, I reached out to people I didn't know, and I reached out to just acquaintances through social media. And everybody responded. Everybody was like, how can I help? From Harry Sullivan of the Truro Daily News, and then Dr. Harry in forever, people in Halifax, you know, CBC, you name it. Everybody kind of wanted to be involved. And that was really, it was really special. And when you live in downtown Toronto and when you work in professional sports, everybody's just looking out for themselves. And a great reminder of the power of community and the power of home, of when everybody's working together towards a common cause, what can be achieved. And I thought that that kitchen party was emblematic of it.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit of one of the hidden benefits of this pandemic, which I hate to say there's any benefit, but is finding those creative ways of connecting again, like you said about connecting with your friends from high school.
Sure.
And even us having this conversation now, I think, you know, if we weren't in this place, would we have started this initiative where we're trying to get folks from Truro to come on and talk about how much we love it and our history with it? I think that's been a fantastic way of connecting us again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's important because I think at this time, a lot of people do feel uneasiness, and especially and not to suggest that it's over by any stretch, but in the early days when there was so much unknown and it was total lockdown, kind of looking around like, you know, it felt like the walls were caving in some days. And the one thing that I noticed is that everybody was in the same boat, so people were picking up the phone and people were responding, and that's important. I mean, the human element, the mental health element of all of this is critical. You know, again, in the sports world that I exist in, they're talking about all these leagues restarting and creating bubbles, even though they're not really bubbles, but effectively that athletes and coaches and staff are going to be sequestered in either hotel or playing venue and not much else. And the bigger question, even beyond the virus, because, you know, all those personnel are going to be tested likely either every day or every other day, is what kind of impact is that going to make on your mental health? When you're in a hotel room or just a playing venue and it's the same people and you're not around your family and you can't really be social outside of that work environment, how is that going to affect you if you're going to be at it for multiple weeks?
Yeah.
If this thing happens, and who knows if it will or not, with hockey and with basketball, they're talking about these players being in this bubble for like 2-3 months. I mean, can you imagine 10 weeks of that without any real contact to the outside world other than the group of 40 or 50 people you're around? That's a grind. That's a grind more mentally, I would think, than physically.
And playing without the crowd has got to be a huge thing as well, right? Like, you can't even imagine now being in a stadium with, you know, tens of thousands of people, or, you know, what you normally see if you look at an NBA game and you see the full stands, they're going to be playing in an empty you know, without that reassurance, I guess, from
yeah. And look, the crowd's a massive part of the entire experience. It's a massive part as a fan, being, you know, like we think about the Raptors won the championship last year. There were at least 50 outdoor viewing parties, 50 outdoor Jurassic Parks across the country. It brought communities together. It brought people together. People who didn't really know or care about basketball just got on board with it.
Yeah.
If you weren't into hoops 10 years ago, the Vancouver Olympics, it brought a country together. From Alex Bilodeau winning the first gold medal to Sidney Crosby scoring the golden goal to win the last gold medal, people all over Canada united. And there's an ability to do that and connect and come together with sport or with music or with whatever. I mean, I was wondering aloud the other day, I'm like, when's the next time people are going to go to an indoor concert? And how is that going to go? And how uneasy can it be? And when you watch some of these old games or old movies or old shows and you see the interaction in such a short period of time, our brains have been rewired to be like, wait a minute, there's, you know, 10 people in an elevator all bunched up. I mean, what's that about? How's that going to go as we go forward?
Yeah. Have you had an opportunity, Arash, to gauge from any of the professional athletes how they're feeling about the potential of this change and getting into that sort of new normal, I guess, of playing?
Yeah, and often you don't know, Sam, about what they're really feeling because so much of it can be corporate speak and, you know, athlete speak. But we've already seen some athletes just say, "I'm not doing this." They've dropped out of the whole thing. You know, in baseball, Ryan Zimmerman is the captain of the Washington Nationals. He's 15 years into his career. He's made his money. But Washington just won a World Series last year for the first time ever. You know, he could have retired. He said, "No, I want one more kick at the can." But he kind of took a look around the landscape and he realizes he's got a family and he's like, "I don't need this right now." David Price, a pitcher who just got traded from Boston to LA, the Dodgers are World Series favorites this year. David Price is making a lot of money. Now, granted, he's made a lot of money too over his career. He said, "I'm out." Some of the NBA players have dropped out, some because they've tested positive, others because they have pre-existing conditions, others haven't. So I think it's an individual decision. A lot of them want to go, a lot of them are all systems go, a lot of them want to play. But I think a lot are also staying quiet. A lot of players who feel they have a lot to lose if they come out and say something publicly, say something against it. And I think there's a lot of uneasiness that we haven't heard of yet that exists not just among athletes, but coaches and staff. I was texting with a medical person today who's just, his text was, "I don't know why we're doing this." And I think that's the reality that a lot of people have. The reason why we're doing this is because if baseball, hockey, and basketball play, or if they don't play, it is a $7 billion swing.
Yeah.
Billion with a B. So that's money talks, and follow the money, and the economics of the business of sport is what drives and dictates almost everything.
Which is sad, I think, personally, you know, on that would be the driving force, you know, like I think
but it's the reality, Sam.
I know. I get that on that level, but then I also think of, you know, like we were saying about mental health, right? And valuing that piece as being, you know, important as well, that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah. But business
players
doors opened with their staff. If you look at players as employees and not, you know, the superstars that they are, then you're in the same, you know, you need your employees to make your business work. So
right. And those employees have at most 15-year window to make as much money as they can. So they're thinking about not just now, but they're thinking about down the road, and what I may say and what I may do may affect my earning power for down the road. And that's a significant piece to this equation too.
For sure. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that I didn't think of, actually. I don't know if you know Trevor McDonald, Arash. Are you familiar with Trevor? He owns Hugger up here in
Yes.
Now I want a number.
I had one yesterday. It was delicious. These sports players have been super active their whole lives. He says, I feel not playing anything could be harder mentally to them. However, it's hard to know anything in these unusual times, which is absolutely true.
And I think another part of that too, Trevor and Sam, is we have to remember that athletes, just like performers and musicians, and we're all just human beings, first and foremost. So basically March 12th, March 13th, whatever that date was, everything gets shut down. And as much as they are high performance athletes, and as much as they are, their lung capacity is better than all of ours combined, and they're able to do things physically that you and I just look at them and say, how the hell are you a human being? They have effectively been shut down from their competitive environments, from their routines, for 4 months now, and only the last couple of weeks have hockey players just gotten back on the ice. And here's what and my point with all this is, we're humans, we're not machines. So it's not like these athletes, you can put them in a garage and after 4 months say, all right, let's just rev that engine back up and get back out on the highway. Yeah. Yes, they're high performance athletes. Yes, they want to compete. But I just wonder, once these leagues get going, if they get going, how many hamstring injuries, how many quad injuries, how many groin injuries, how many non-COVID medical issues there are going to be. Because if you've been shut down completely, how can you go from 0 to 100? They're talking about playing playoff hockey and playoff basketball. And what are their minutes on the ice, minutes on the floor going to be in this lead up? It just may be, oh man. One executive I spoke with a while back, I thought the best line I've heard through this entire pandemic when it's come to sports is that for every answer I'm being given, I have 10 more questions. And I think that's the same in the medical field. I think that's the same in the business field. I think that's the same in almost any field. Once you've been shut down, and once there is the equation of an airborne virus that we know so little about that can spread the way this thing can spread, I think all of us, we just have so many questions about all of it, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think in the, comparing, for me, not being in the sports world, comparing it to sort of events, music, theater, that sort of thing, that's sort of my world, is the same thing. It's that panic of when you do return to normal, what does that look like? And will people come? Because there's, of course, anxiety and all kinds of things associated with spectators going and actually rejoining those events as well, right? So there's so much, like you said, so many questions that you have on top of the other questions that you started with.
Yeah, whatever normal is going to be really interesting.
You see, that's the word they'll take out of the dictionary next.
Yes.
We don't know what that is anymore. But
so, Arash, what's your background?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is Truro famous. We haven't really talked about your roots here. So
was your background in Truro or in Truro in general?
So my parents were born in Iran. They did undergrad there. Then they wanted to come over to North America to do grad school. And while they were doing grad school, a revolution broke out and war broke out in Iran. They're like, whoa, we're going to just chill out here until things calm down. And 40 years later, things haven't calmed down. So my dad did engineering. He got a job offer at the Nova Scotia Agricultural College. And so we moved to Truro when I was 4 or 5 years old. And Truro's where I grew up. Truro's where, I went to school, went to high school, graduated. My first media job was at the Truro Daily News. Wow. And I have a younger sister, and she graduated from CEC also. And then I went to school outside of Montreal, a school called Bishop's University. My sister went to Carleton in Ottawa. Then she moved out west, and I bounced around from different media jobs before landing in Toronto. So, but yeah, Truro was the roots, the base of it. Grew up on Purdy Drive. Went to this is how I really feel old, because I went to St. Mary's Elementary School, which is now a bunch of condos on King Street. And I went to Truro Junior High, which I think got condemned and gone, right?
There's apartment buildings there now.
There's apartment buildings now.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I was telling that to my dad, so he's like, so basically you're uneducated. I'm like, well, yeah, that's basically it. Except CEC's holding strong, so.
I was going to say, you're good with CEC. That's still a staple of Truro.
And a lot of people I went to high school with are now teaching over there, so go figure.
I know. A lot of people make their way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at two of them. And so what drew you to eventually land in Toronto? And I have a second question to that, which is what drew you to sports journalism specifically?
So what drew me to Toronto was the gig at Sportsnet, because I wanted to do sports media. I had worked sports radio. I'd worked for 2 different professional sports teams in the CFL, and I'd worked for The Score. Before The Score was just an app on your phone, it actually used to be a TV station, so I did that too. But I worked in Montreal and Ottawa, Calgary, Winnipeg before landing in Toronto and landing at this gig. So made the rounds and had different opportunities. I just really enjoy telling stories. Like, I love sports, I always did. I was a very mediocre athlete at a young age, and then I became an even worse athlete as I got older. I still really enjoy sports. I enjoy telling, and what I love most about my gig is that I get to tell stories, and that's a big motivator for me. To go into different events and be able to tell a decent story. And I tell you what, it was Mike McKay, who actually now works at Basketball Canada. He was the women's basketball coach at CEC. I knew Mike from growing up, from going to camps and Cougar camps and all that kind of stuff. And he said, hey, I got a call from the Truro Daily News. They're looking for somebody to write about our high school teams. He's like, I thought of you. Here's the guy's name and number. Give him a call. And that's how it all got started when I was in like grade 11 or grade 12. And Mike was a big part of that. And still to this day, we see each other at least once or twice a year, either at a national basketball championship. We run into each other in the city. And one thing that I really appreciated about Mike and Bob Pierce and growing up was it did not matter that we were from a small town.
Yeah.
It did not matter. There was never an excuse given. It was like, it doesn't matter where you're from. Go get better. You can go do that. You can go be whatever you want to be. If it's a musician, if it's an actor, if it's a performer, if it's a whatever. Why not you? Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks, when they won a championship, he said, going into the Super Bowl, I just kept telling the guys, why not us? Why not us? And I just laughed to myself. I'm like, yo, Russ, that was so 90s, dude, because that's how I was, brought up by the teachers and the mentors that, shoot, if somebody's doing it, you have just as equal a chance of getting there if you put in the time, if you put in the work, and if you keep at it. And I look around from some of the people that I grew up with, Charlie Acort's part of our graduating class as well. If somebody wants to go get something, most of the onus is on them to go get it. And there's a couple of quotes I really like about that. And one of them is, hard work beats talent when talent don't work. Now, my grade 7 English teacher wouldn't like the grammar on it, but that's a line from Keenan McCardell, used to be a receiver in the NFL. Hard work beats talent when talent don't work. And I think that's relatable to anything, no matter what genre, no matter what field you want to pursue.
I love that. That's awesome. And I'm a quoteaholic, so I'm going to take that one. And
we have such a strong, especially sports community in Truro, between the schools and the Bearcats, and sport is kind of a way of life here. And since your time, we've grown in terms of the facilities that are available to our young athletes, especially, and people are working hard to continue that with the TAC grounds, for example, and I mean, the Cougar Dome is an amazing addition to our community. the rec has been an incredible addition to the community. So it's almost like even now they're young athletes are being given more opportunity at their foundation to grow as athletes before they move on to whatever they decide to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a real important piece to understand here. Like, so I cover a lot of different sports, and one sport that I cover a lot of is tennis. And the one thing that about tennis that I've understood, everybody's an individual, and each individual has their own story of how they got there, what it took to get there, and how they go about it. So the first real single tennis star that Canada has produced is Milos Raonic. Milos is about to turn 30. He was born in Montenegro, moved here when he was a young kid, son of an engineer, and his mom worked in banking. So they were a middle-class group, middle-class family, and Milos got into tennis because his parents didn't know what to do with him when he was like 8 years old or 9 years old for March break. They were both working jobs, and a flyer comes in the mail and says tennis camp. They're like, perfect. We'll drop him off at tennis camp at 8 in the morning, and we'll pick him up at 5 in the afternoon. And Milos is tall, and Milos doesn't have much natural athletic ability. He's not an athlete. They've put a math nerd into a big body and transformed him into a world-class tennis player who, oh, by the way, ended up becoming 3 in the world and got to a Wimbledon final. But what Milos had that people of my generation in Truro didn't have were facilities and different structures in place in order for him to succeed and in order for him to play 12 months a year. And I think back to when I was a really mediocre tennis player in Victoria Park at the Truro Tennis Club and playing time in the summers there. I remember there were a couple of kids there that were my age and a little bit older who I truly believe if they were able to play 12 months a year, if they had the same structure, if they had the same facilities, that they would have had a chance to maybe end up on a U.S. scholarship somewhere, maybe even end up going down the professional level if they wanted to, if things worked out for them. But that structure at that time wasn't there. But now, Michelle, you just talked about all the things that are being developed, what Ian Lapointe and his group are doing with the TAC rounds and trying to expand that. What Gannon and the folks at the Cougar Dome did in the initial stages of getting that thing off the ground, now bringing in solid coaching. That's so important and that's so vital. And now, just because you're from Toronto doesn't mean you're the next professional player. Hospital is the guy who got to a Wimbledon quarterfinal. He's crafted out a 10, 12-year career. Vashik grew up in Vernon, BC, a small town. And the courts that he grew up playing on had weeds coming out of the cracks in the concrete courts. Vashik got after it. And now we have back home legit facilities. Doesn't matter if you want to swim, doesn't matter if you want to run, doesn't matter if you want to play soccer, doesn't matter if you want to hit that yellow tennis ball, doesn't matter if you want to hoop. I mean, you have real opportunities to do this. And so I just think that's such an advantage now, and it's an opportunity for so many people who are coming up now to take advantage of and to thrive because of. And I'm so thrilled because I think all of us, whenever we see one of our own make it, it's terrific. I remember being in the Washington Capitals locker room after a Saturday night game and going in there and seeing a dude from Brookfield there. And I went and introduced myself, and here I am in a suit, and this guy's looking at me like, why does a media guy want to interview me? I had nothing to do with any of this. And when I introduced myself, saying, hey, I'm the sideline reporter for Hockey Night, but I'm also from Truro, his face just blossomed. And who do you know? Who do we know? Who are mutual friends in common? How often do you get back home? Blah, blah, blah. There's a real unique bond there. And so I always tell people, hey, if there's anything I can do to help, if there's any advice, if there's anybody I can connect you with, I'm happy to do it because we want our own to do well, and that's why I really appreciate what you two are doing right now to just kind of amplify the people from back home, because I think that really matters.
We appreciate
Oh,
Thank you.
So you mentioned tennis. You do a lot of tennis, not commentating, sorry.
Reporting, I guess. I don't know.
Reporting. I don't know the lingo.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
say words. Yeah.
I sit courtside and I roast in the sun. So whatever you want to call that, that's what I do. Back when we had.
And I know you from the Blue Jays. So, and I know, like you said, you've done some hockey night in Canada as well. Are you allowed to say what your favorite is?
It's funny, my favorite sport is football, and we don't really cover that much football. So I get to do the Grey Cup and the Super Bowl most years, so that's a thrill. But I just like the variety. I like going into different sports, and I find doing the different sports helps me along the way because you get different perspectives. You see different ways people go about it. You speak to coaches differently, and it's funny. You share information, and I remember showing up at a Davis Cup tennis. Team Canada was playing France or Spain or something, and I just come from the Super Bowl, and all the guys wanted to do was ask me questions about the Super Bowl. And then I remember being at the NBA Finals last year and showing up to the Jays at Yankee Stadium, and Randall Grichuk just grabs me. He's like, "Oh my God, man, how was it? Like, how was the NBA Finals?" I'm like, dude, it was incredible. So they're all fans too, and the more you can relate with people on different things, and the more, Randall, the one thing I saw about how Steph Curry in his preparation, he's like, wow, that's really interesting, because they don't see it either. They're caught up in their own world. And telling people about how guys stretch and how guys warm up and how they get motivated and how they handle situations. Everybody wants to get a little piece and a little bit of knowledge about how other people do their gig too.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much crossover too.
Yeah. But like you said, everybody's kind of in their own little community and don't necessarily just share with each other. So you're the go-between.
There you go, something like that.
How often do you get back to Truro? You said that people will ask you that question. So we'll ask you now. How often do you get back home? Not right now, of course, but
right. And that's what's so weird about all this. I try and get back around once a year in some kind of capacity. My sister lives out west. When she went for grad school, she stayed out in BC, and my folks have retired out there. So it's weird that home is Truro, but home is no longer Truro. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Your people aren't here.
Right. But I still have a lot of people there, so that's what's cool. So try and get back whenever I can, and it's great to see how the town's grown.
Mm-hmm. It's quite a difference. I moved back. I grew up here, and I moved back. It'll be 10 years at the end of this month since I moved back, and the difference in that 10 years is it feels like a completely different town, and not only physically, but in the whole vibe of Truro. It used to be, because I moved back from Halifax, and so my life was in the city. My social life was in Halifax because there was nothing to do in Truro. And I joked that I went from, people would be like, "Oh, so how's Truro?" And now people are like, "Oh, I so want to visit." I have so many friends in the city who want to come to town, and well, partly too because now we brag about it.
Right.
Why Sam and I started Local Love was to celebrate the good things about Truro, because like any small town, we have a habit of ignoring the good things and mourning the bad things. So yes, Margolian's closed, but it's been closed. There are people who are still mourning the closure of Margolian's and don't shop at the shops that are there. So I find that it's been a total shift in the past decade of how we perceive ourselves and how we're perceived, I think, by the rest of Nova Scotia, as now we're, this great little town. And it's great that you come back, even though your family has gone other places, that you still come home.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's become cool now is to shop local, especially during the pandemic. Everybody's been talking about that.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, that was something that was really important for my parents, to always support locally more than anything else. Like we'd go to mom would always drag me to the farmer's market, and we go to Kavanaugh's, and we go to Ryan's IGA. Like, it was not about going to the big box stores. And I always asked why, and she said because they're our neighbors and they're trying to make it too. And so that's why I was so pumped when Mariah and her group, when they got the home thing going. And I'm like, I want to help them as much as I can. It just kind of moves forward. And especially now when you see so many businesses and stores and restaurants that have closed, or had a rough go because of the shutdown through the pandemic, everybody wants to support them, and that's really important. I think that's significant. And yeah, there are a couple of chain restaurants I go to, but not many. I think it's really important to help the people who are making it a go, and that's something that growing up in a small town really taught me.
That's awesome. We love Mariah, and she's done some really cool things getting Truro's name out there, and just so innovative and finds ways to connect with people across I'll say across the country, mostly because of the pride for home in general.
Yeah.
When I was living out in Calgary, she was out there too. She and Dave were out there, and I don't know if she's changed, man, but don't get it twisted. That woman likes to drink her wine. So yeah, she's doing some great things, but man, she knows how to empty a wine bottle too. I think that person, man.
That's awesome. No judgment.
No, dude, I was right there with my own.
It was like, I'm proud of her.
It was not a wine tasting, I'll tell you that much.
You say a force unto herself. She amazes me with, she'll say something will be an idea one day and it's real the next day.
Yeah.
She's really done some fantastic things as a business person and as a representative of Truro and Nova Scotia. It's really something for, us to be so proud of her.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So what's next for you, Arash? I know all things are different in the sports world, but what is next? How are you making it through these times?
So everything's been different because so much of what we do is connected to live sports, and there's been no live sports. So our network I work at Sportsnet, and Tim and Sid is one of the shows that airs from 6 to 8 o'clock Atlantic time every night. And so I'm co-hosting that, just filling in for one of the hosts this week. And they tell me there's going to be baseball, and the Blue Jays are in town. They were practicing down the street yesterday. So if they can somehow keep that going, I'll be covering Jays practice next week. And they have a 60-game schedule for a season that apparently is going to start at the end of July. If that happens, we'll be covering a bunch of those games. The home games we're going to do from the stadium. The road games, we're not traveling to that festival called America with all their cases right now. We're just going to do it from studio. But everything is a day-to-day existence.
Yeah.
I just saw about the cases in Florida, and that's where the Jays are about to start, and we can go down that road right now. So we'll see.
I have to say, I would never normally know Tim and Sid if it wasn't for my husband Joey, who watches it religiously. So that's cool that you're hosting. As soon as you said that, I got the theme song stuck in my head. So thank you for that.
Right. Let's hear it, Sam. Let's hear it.
Tim and Sid.
Yay! Those are sheepdogs. They're who got that going.
So we're going to wrap up here, Arash. I know Michelle has one final question for you. Yeah. It's sort of our ritual.
It is, and like I say it every time, it kind of changes a bit every time I ask it. But when you do come home, when you get the opportunity, what do you most look forward to? Are you a, gotta go get a donaire as soon as I land in Nova Scotia kind of guy? Or what is your favorite thing about coming home? What do you most look forward to?
I mean, the proper answer would probably be the people, but the answer
Doesn't have to be proper though.
no, but the answer is getting together with the people for an excuse to drink local beer. I'll tell you what, Nova Scotia breweries have just become awesome. Like it's been terrific getting to sample. Good friends of mine were up here last year, maybe the year before. I was away doing something, maybe spring training or something. So my condo was vacant, and I live like a block from the CN Tower. So anyway, friends were coming from home to go to a Raptor game. They'd never been to a Raptor game. And my buddy Dave wanted to surprise his wife Sarah, who loves the Raptors, for Christmas gift. We're going to go in February. Anyway, all that to say, they left me a bunch of Tatamagouche beer and a Tatamagouche t-shirt as a thanks. So I texted him. I'm like, well, Dave, those beers didn't stand a chance. Next time I'm home, we're going to sit on a patio and drink some of those. So I think, yeah, part of it is definitely getting together with people. Part of it is sipping. And Michelle, it used to be a donaire, but man, in my old age, the donaires didn't sit as well as they used to. So I still do it. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I learned my lesson, but sometimes I regret them after.
Gotta have the antacid with you.
Right, yeah. Right.
I hear you.
Well, Jeff Babineau hopped on and said, come home after COVID. So you've been officially invited back home.
I appreciate it, Jeff. Yeah, no, and hopefully whenever this ends, that will definitely be one of the first places on the list. Just to get back, just to see what's happening. And wild times we're living in, ladies.
Yes, true enough. Will they send you, will they send you here for the Women's Worlds when they finally come in 2021?
So the answer is I don't know. I don't know how anything is going to go after. I mean, last year, I was actually looking it up a few weeks ago. Last year, I did 104 flights in 2019. And this is the longest stretch. What are we? Almost July, almost middle of July. So this 4-month stretch, whatever it's been, this is the longest I have not left home, my place, the city. Since probably I was in high school. So it's crazy.
Wowzer. It is crazy, but we do appreciate you taking the time today, Arash. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet both of you, and thanks very much for having me, and thanks for this idea and concept that you're doing. I think it's really important, and I meant what I said about anybody who's interested in sports, interested in the media scene. If you're a young athlete with any questions, please reach out. Happy to provide any kind of insight, the little that I have, and some ideas of what could work, what might work, and happy to do it and happy to pass that along.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you for being such a good advocate for Truro and Nova Scotia, and we'll see you soon on TV.
I appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Arash.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are going to wrap things up here, and we'll be announcing our next week. Why don't we announce her now?
Well, we actually have it booked. Like I said, when we're actually,
we're on the ball. We're ahead of the game. We have our pal Alicia Sims from Truro.
The local love Truro buzz is what we'll call it.
Right. So Alicia's going to join us next Wednesday at 3.
Yes.
I just had to test myself because I'm about 90% sure that's what we said.
I think that's what we said. That rings the bell.
Perfect. So hopefully you guys will join us again.
Yes.
And again, thanks to Arash for joining us from Toronto. Right.
Exactly. See you next week, everyone.